Hey there, Power Players! Tonight we're playing with power, Turtle Power. Did you know that before I collected any of this, I collected the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for about 25 years. I had all of the Playmates toys and all of the comic books, and I've Ninja Turtle tattoos down my arm, and that's actually how I came to meet Kevin Eastman when he and Peter Laird signed my arm, and I had those signatures tattooed onto my arm. I was really big into Ninja Turtles. I had a gigantic collection, and heck, even Kevin Eastman said yes to being the best man at my wedding. Needless to say, super into the Turtles. Then at some point there was kind of a perfect storm in my life where I had kind of grown that collection as much as I felt that I could grow it, and I was starting to ask really existential questions like, does this thing define me? And once I kind of felt like I was finished, it went from being a collection that I felt like I was nurturing and growing to starting to feel like this thing that was kind of stagnating in my life. About the same time, my late wife Heather got diagnosed with cancer, and around the same time I started working for Nickelodeon and actually had the opportunity to work on the Turtles. So there was also this sort of feeling that I didn't want to be too close to it so that I could make good decisions on behalf of the brand, if that makes sense. That's kind of how I got into collecting video games to begin with. I had this gigantic Turtles collection that I wasn't sure that I wanted anymore, that was very high value, and there was a lot of really serious things going on in my life, and I was just kind of looking for kind of something else to do and to distract me from this big thing that was cancer in my life. So I sold most of that, and that was actually how I built my first set. Before I collected Nintendo Power, I collected video games, so my first set was the Super Nintendo, and I used the money from the Turtles collection, or part of that money, to build that set, and part of the NES set after that. So what you kind of see around me now was really built from a passion for the Ninja Turtles. So anytime that those two fandoms collide, that's a really joyous thing for me, right? If I can find Nintendo Power art of the Ninja Turtles, that's beyond amazing for me, right? So that's what you see behind me today. This isn't all of the Ninja Turtle art that I have, but I thought that we would break it down to each property, and so behind me what you see is all of the original art for the two Nintendo versions of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters for the NES and the Super Nintendo. So the art that we're looking at today is from these two issues of Nintendo Power, issues 54 and 56. 54, actually, I also own the cover art for. This is Secret of Mana by Dan McGowan, which we will look at on another video. But both of these issues are some of my favorite. This cover, Dan's cover for Secret of Mana, is one of my favorite covers, and who doesn't love a bonus issue? This is the issue 56 was the Mega Man X bonus issue, and all of the bonus issues, not only are they full of content, but just full of amazing content. So these are the two that we're going to look through today. So before I show you the art behind me, let's go through the art on the page. So here we have the opening spread for issue 54, Tournament Fighters for the NES. What I think is interesting about this page in particular is that, unlike the Super Nintendo spread, which we will see next, rather than using the cover art for the game, which was subsequently painted by Steve Levine of Mirage fame, they chose to have the contract artist paint this header instead. One thing that I find interesting here is that you can really tell the difference in the dynamic quality of the graphics of the games by looking at the art that represents them. If you look at this moveset here, it's much more muted than the Super Nintendo art. You'll see In the Super Nintendo version, you know, for instance, Mikey is spitting a fireball, whereas here he's just got a little bit of fire coming off of his feet. It also strikes me a little bit odd that they didn't paint a specific Donatello image. You can see here on the bottom right of page 93, Donatello is fighting Casey with his back towards the camera. That's the same on the previous page. That is the same image that they used to represent Donatello, and it just seems like, it just kind of feels like he was cheated a little bit, whereas his three brothers got camera-facing images, and for Donatello they just reused a piece on subsequent pages. I also think the Shredder piece here is very interesting because that is really reminiscent. His art style in both the game and the art here is really reminiscent of sort of a cross between his appearance in the original Mirage comics and the first film, whereas everyone else is very kind of closer to the Toon version of them, except for Casey is kind of odd. He is neither I mean, with the sweatpants and the tank top, he's, I guess, most reminiscent of the Mirage Casey, but really he's neither Toon nor film, and so it was just kind of an interesting choice to give him the sweatpants and the undershirt. All right, so let's take a look at the original art now. So again, this is for volume 54 of Tournament Fighters for the NES. Here's the splash image. I love this piece. It almost looks like it's painted on velvet. However, I have taken a close look at it when it was not framed, and it's definitely not on velvet. One thing that I kind of wish that I would have done is taken it to a professional cleaner. If you look here, this is unfortunately not reflection. This is actually staining on the piece. I think someone probably more talented than I could have gotten rid of it, and maybe I'll still clean it at some point in time, but right now it's stable and it's just kind of sitting there. So there's really no urgent need to have it cleaned. But let's get real close in here and really take a look at this line work. It's really a beautiful, beautiful piece, despite the fact that it's not, again, painted by Steve Levine, who painted the original covers. This is a contract artist who prefers not to be named. So, but again, just a absolutely tremendous piece. And this piece is almost one for one as far as the size of it being printed in the magazine. So if I pull the camera out a little bit, you can see that the piece is almost the same size as the page. It's probably 80% on the page. Here's the 4 turtle images from pages 90 and 91. I will navigate the glare out of the way for you. Here is Raphael. I do apologize for the studio lights. Unfortunately, trying to film framed pieces has its challenges. Here's the Donatello versus Casey Jones. Here's the flaming jump kick Mikey. I also think it's kind of interesting that they chose the color choice for his bandanas. It's much closer to yellow than it is an orange. And once again on the printed page, here's the Raphael. So really in this image, you never get to see him in his full glory like you do on the page, or on the painted page, which is one of the wonderful things about collecting original art. Same thing with Donatello and Casey here. Donatello gets the back half of him cut off, and here you can see him fully. Here now to the villains or supporting characters. Here's Hothead. Again, I apologize, I will minimize the glare. Most of the time I use museum glass. I'm not sure that these got museum glass because of their size. Museum glass is prohibitively expensive, and so very large pieces I often just can't afford to frame them in museum glass. All of the glass that I use is UV protected, so don't worry, there's no danger to the pieces. But when I say museum glass, I'm really talking about the anti-glare component. Here's Hothead on the page. Again, sadly, he gets a little bit cut off on the page, so we would never get to see this glorious tail. Here we have another shot of Casey. So while Donatello only gets one kind of back shot for these pieces, Casey gets two, which doesn't seem particularly fair. And here he is on the page. Here I think we just get a very, very small part of his bat cut off there a little bit. And here, the man of the hour is Shredder with his smoke bomb. Again, very interesting style choice for him. Here we are back looking at the printed page for issue 56. This is again a bonus issue with a very cool card embossed. If you've never seen this cover before, it's very cool. It's an embossed cardstock outer cover for Mega Man X, and then a different inner cover also for Mega Man X. This cover, I don't know who the artist is. So if you do, let me know. Here is a call out for Super Nintendo Tournament Fighters. This issue is interesting too because not only does it have Tournament Fighters in it, but also Radical Rescue, Turtles 3 for the Game Boy. Unfortunately, I don't have any Radical Rescue art here, as I was mentioning before, where sometimes they have, or as I was mentioning before, sometimes they use actual cover art for their article headers. This is one of those cases where it's actually using Tom Du Bois's cover art for the title header. Unfortunately, I don't have any of the other spot illustrations for Radical Rescue. It is very, very cool. Maybe someday. I'm always looking. You know I'm always looking. Gosh, this is such a fun issue. When was the last time you saw Magic Eye in something? I mean, come on. But let's get to Tournament Fighters, which is right after the poster. So here, this is a case where they did use the cover art for the article header. So this is the cover art painted by Steve Levine of Mirage Studios. I do not own this piece. I wish I did, but cover art, you know, as expensive as collecting magazine art can be, collecting cover art for video games is even more astronomically expensive. So I kind of have to draw a line sometimes, and so I don't typically try to go for covers that appear in Nintendo Power Magazine, only because that would just be an astronomical addition to my budget, which is not infinite. So all right, so here we go. This is what I was talking about when I was saying you can really kind of tell the visual fidelity of the game by looking at the difference in the art for this article. So while before you had very muted poses like Leonardo throwing a roundhouse kick, here you have him essentially casting a sonic boom with his swords, and Raphael here, rather than just having kind of speed lines around him in the NES version, here he's actually throwing a fireball. Turning the page now to 38-39. Here we have Donatello getting his camera-facing pose, unlike the NES version, with his 100-hand slap, but with the bow staff. And Michelangelo here, like I said, throwing or rather spitting the Hadouken fireball. It's just such a great image. So, you know, image for image, I think I really do prefer the Super Nintendo art to the NES art for Tournament Fighters, although all of this art was painted by the same artist. Continuing on, we have this great hero shot of Armagon, as well as Wingnut there, although sans screw loose, which is interesting. And then here we have Chrome Dome, which really looks nothing like the action figure, which was all vacuum formed chrome. And then here we have Asuka, who only appears in the Super Nintendo version of Tournament Fighters and the Turtles. To my knowledge, I don't think she appears in any other form of media. Originally, she started life out as Mitsu from the third Turtles film, but through the course of development, they changed her name. I would wager to guess it had something to do with the reception of the third Turtles film, which was not overly awesome. But, you know, that's just conjecture. Here we have War, who is from the Archie TMNT series. And then we have Cyber Shredder, which was an interesting treatment for him, only that, like, he doesn't quite feel like the Super Shredder from the Super Nintendo beat 'em up, which Turtles in Time, which is kind of what I think they were going for. But he's also not that close to any other treatment like before, where he was very close to the original Mirage comic treatment in the NES version. He's not really that close to that treatment of him either, so I'm not sure how they kind of landed on this look for him. Although now that I'm thinking about it, he does look a lot like the Wacky action figure from the Playmates line, so maybe that was some influence there. Alright, so let's take a look at some original art. So here we have Donatello and his 100-hand slap, and of course I mean that in jest, but in the Super Nintendo version their movesets are very similar to Street Fighter characters, and you can kind of clearly tell which characters have which Street Fighter moves. But so here is the Donatello. I love the line work on his multiple fists here. It really sells the motion. Our Leonardo with his sonic boom. The shading work here, especially towards the edges of the energy beam here, is just exquisite. Down here we have our Raphael throwing his fireball. Here he is on the page. Here, as opposed to the NES version, they didn't cut the characters off nearly as much. So we do still get a pretty good view of the art. Here's your Donatello on the page here. But then lastly, let's go to this majestic beast. This is Michelangelo and his spitting of a fireball, which is just, I mean, the art is just incredible for him. Look at that look on his face. Is just the amount of emotion portrayed in this particular piece is just fantastic. And there he is on the page again. Moving over to our secondary characters, here is the original art for Armagon. Down here we have Asuka. Can I just tell you, this war made this very difficult to frame, because if you can see on this particular frame, so I can back up enough, these three pretty uniformly square, those two pretty uniformly square, but then war just had to be this weird size. There he is on the page. And here is Wingnut. And then Chrome Dome. Last but not least, Cyber Shredder. Now, despite the fact that I think his name is quite silly, his art is beautiful. And again, the energy coming off of him just crackles. Well, I hope you enjoyed this turtle-rific episode of Art of Nintendo Power. As always, if you like what I'm doing here, please, please, please like and subscribe and hit that bell icon so that you never miss anything that I post. Oh, also a quick announcement. I have decided to start a Ko-fi account, Ko-fi, whatever, which is a way that you can support me directly. I have mentioned that archiving this collection is very, very expensive, particularly the hidden cost of framing. And framing isn't something that I just do so I can hang it up here at the studio. Framed work is also really the only way that I'm going to be able to take the art out on tour once the global situation passes, which, if you don't know already, is the ultimate goal for me. Starting this YouTube channel was really just a way for me to share this art until I can bring it to you physically. Which also reminds me, if you are friends with a local convention or you just really feel compelled to see my art in person, let them know that I exist. Send them to my Twitter. Have them hit me up. Once we get some semblance of normalcy, I am happy to come show my collection at any show that'll have me. which is also how direct contributions will help me. So I pledge to you now that if you do support me directly on Ko-fi, your donations will go to one of two things, either framing this art, or in the absence of me needing to frame something at the time, it will go towards me being able to visit a convention and exhibit there. Because some shows have already reached out to me and essentially said that barring the cost of getting me there, they would love to have me. So if I was supported directly, I would be able to kind of pay my own way to exhibit at those shows. It is absolutely wonderful that large shows like Portland or E3 or CES have reached out and wanted me to exhibit there, and they can afford to get me there. But there's so many local mom and pop shows that I would love to go to that I can't make it make sense if I have to pay for it myself. Anyway, nothing else is changing. If you just want to keep watching my videos and keep seeing this art, then awesome, I'm happy to show it to you. But if you do decide you'd like to support me directly, there is a link in the description. One last announcement, 20th of February, 2021, I will be attending the virtual convention Uplink. I'm going to put on a panel about Nintendo Power art history and a little bit about my methods and how you can buy things that aren't for sale and that kind of stuff. So if that interests you and you'd like to participate directly in a virtual convention with me, then I will also put a link in the description for Uplink. So I think that's everything. If you've made it this far, congratulations and thank you. And we will see you next time on Art of Nintendo Power. Thanks. Bye.